Vítame vás. Hovorím trochu po slovensky. Iba anglicky. I will speak in English. And of course, my subject today is about the effectiveness of sports programs in the United States school system. Now, I'm not a typical American who thinks that if it works in the United States, it will work everywhere. Really, this is a menu. This is an offer. Ponuka, vybrat. It is something to choose from. It's information. That's all. My wife said that if my wife is Slavic, she said if I was a typical American, she wouldn't have married me. So I will be doing the only presentation in English, and Europeans understand each other if they speak to each other in English. But nobody understands native speakers of English, so it might be a little challenging. I'll do my best. So I first would like to thank Uchena Pravnica Spoločnost. Pripačte pri mám vyslovnost. And I'd also like to give a special thanks to Michael Valek, who persuaded me to come. Prisvečivi. He talked me into, convinced me to come and speak today about the subject of effective methods of sports in the United States. And it's a very complex subject. It's a country, very big country, with 320 million people. And the number one thing to know about the United States, to understand it in any way, is it is not just federal control. It's a very local system, including sports education in schools. Very local. In fact, each state is like a country, and each state has their own laws, their own, sometimes their own military, can you believe? But with sports programs, it is controlled by the state and local. The federal only sets basic guidelines. The other important thing to know is sports is part of the culture. The only reason it is successful in the United States is it becomes out of the roots or the core of love of sports. So allow me to give you the scope of what I'll speak about. Number one, why the U.S. sports education system is effective. Number two, how the sports education system works in the USA. And number three, the role of private foundations, organizations, and businesses support sports in public schools. Now, there won't be much time to go deeply, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask me later. Now, number one, why USA sports education system is effective. Really, the public education system's support of sports in public schools has only developed since World War II, and really not since the 1950s, but exponentially in each generation. Every decade there's more and more and more interest in that. Why is that so exciting? It's really rewarding for the culture. To be a winner is a celebrity. It's financially rewarding. The government supports sports in schools. It realizes that it has to have a healthy population, a competitive population. Konferencii culture. Very productive population. Also, sports teaches values. Sports teaches values like fair play, following the rules, leadership. So these are values that the government finds helps the country. How does the sports system work in the United States? The responsibility and the management of the funding are local, not federal. Because it's part of the culture, most of the schools, almost all the schools, exceed the basic guidelines that are set. It comes from the taxpayers, mainly with grades 1 through 12, from local property taxes. And the people elect the managers of each school district. It's a district or area based upon population, and the people who manage the money and decide the priorities are voted on, elected officials. So people have a say in how the money is spent. Why would they spend money on sports? Why would the taxpayers elect a local government that's spending their tax money on sports? Because it's part of the culture. It comes out of the roots. The local people love their teams, and they are willing to spend the money on it. The money that is spent, as you see, property taxes, federal government does provide some money. Mainly, that money is tied to following guidelines. So there are grants from the federal government, the United States government, which give support to the school districts, and also from the state. I'll explain that in America, up until from first grade till 12th grade, sports is a requirement. But the local districts normally exceed the requirement of the federal government. So typically sports is every day, physical education, but also sports teams. Sports teams are organized for after the school day, and they're extremely popular. The money that comes in is not only the money from the property taxes, but also there's ticket sales, and we'll talk about later, private funding, business support, organizational support. The classes are taught, the physical education classes that are required and are typically every day for an hour or two, depending on the school district. They are pretty much run by or operated by, managed by a sports department in each school district with experts. They have to have a degree, often a doctorate in sports. It's taken very seriously. Also, the people who act as coaches are oftentimes volunteers. They do not get paid because they love the sports and they're willing to spend their time. So they volunteer their time. But in rich school districts, sometimes there are paid professional coaches too. Sometimes business funding allows school districts to hire professional coaches for priority sports, but they are taught by experts. The local districts choose the kind of sports that are taught in school. It can be a very wide range of sports, but typically Americans have baseball as a high priority, the national sport, but now soccer is growing. Football is growing in popularity. And also, American-style football is very big. But it depends on the area. It's a very big country, so it's very difficult in 15 minutes or 20 for me to cover everything. And there's a wide variation in the hundreds of school districts. But school sports teams, it's a national religion. People are fanatics about their team. It's a culture of winners. Now, I'll give you an example from my own experience. I worked as a consultant for many years, advising universities and also schools how to incorporate private funding, business funding for the schools to achieve their goals. And as well, I work for brands like Adidas, Nike, for brand sponsorship of major sporting events. And my experience in school from grade 1 through 12 is that inspiration and knowledge that actually helped me to succeed as a consultant later. That's my personal experience. I understood the sports that I was promoting brands for, supporting, say, a tennis tournament. I understood the sport. Where did I learn that? Well, I learned it actually in school, where we learned a lot of sports. Also, I had a friend who was a teammate as well, same school system. He's now an advisor and consultant for the Olympic Committee, as well as an MIT professor, MIT and Harvard professor, both, and he went through the same school system. See, the culture of sports brings about a lot of good things. It brought about knowledge in the sport for the future success of sports, but it also brought about the values that helped me succeed and my friend to succeed in business. Now, I'll spend a moment on universities. The universities, oh, thank you. That's a light. I'll talk. The universities of each state operate very much under the control of the state government, as if it's a country. So if you ask me a question, and I don't sound like an expert, that's not why I'm sweating. It's because there's 50 countries, and each one's different. It is not controlled mainly by the federal government in Washington, D.C. So each state operates the public universities, the state universities, that the majority of students go to. And these are paid for by various taxes, income taxes, sales taxes like your VAT. And again, the officials are elected who choose how to spend the money. Why do they spend money on sports? Because it's in the culture. It comes out of the roots. It's something that's very important to not only the government, but the people who pay the taxes. It's a priority. And the quality of the children's education in school, as well as when they get older and go to university, is supported. Now, sports in universities are elective. You can choose to go into the sports. There's generally not required sports unless it's a sports specialization degree. The federal government's role in universities is controlled by the United States Department of Education, and they set the basic guidelines that control how the sports are managed, the rules, and also very important that the students have to have a certain grade level. Some fanatics in sports forget that if they go into university, they are supposed to study, not just play sports. So there has to be some academic requirements as well, but those are largely controlled by the state, but also the federal guidelines. So the federal government also has a requirements. They will not provide funding for the states, for the state education system, the universities, unless those guidelines are followed. But again, most of the time, these are exceeded. by the states. The role of private foundations and business funding in supporting public sports. Now, here's something I had a lot of experience with in even the basic school, from Základní škola, you would have on through the universities. There are many opportunities for businesses to support and pay for public education. And I will tell you some of the ways that they do that. But why would private companies spend money on sports education? Why would they make that a priority? Well, there's an old saying, everybody loves a winner. Well, in the American culture, it's a mentality, a part of the culture. They love winners, and they really find that when the excitement of businesses find that when there's the excitement of sports in the air, and their brand is shown, it creates an association, a memory, a good memory of their brand associated with a winner or the excitement of sports. And really, honestly, I've worked with a lot of CEOs who decide the major decisions. Sometimes they spend the money because secretly their favorite team, it's their favorite team. They're sports fanatics. Of course, the priority of their business spending is going to be supporting their favorite team. They have to win. And so that's also part of the culture. How do they do it? How do these businesses support sports education? Well, they might pay a huge amount of money, very big, enormous amount of money, just to name a stadium. And that money will go into not only a university stadium, but now high schools are getting state-of-the-art stadiums to have that brand. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that that would work here. I'm only offering ideas, but really these international brands are doing this, and they're not only doing it in America, but worldwide, because sports, excitement, and the brand create a connection that helps that business reputation, business image. And that's more valuable than spending money on advertising, on commercials. So there are many other ways businesses can support, but mainly they want their brand associated with winners, excitement, challenge. Now, also, I mentioned private foundations, and I will talk about the private foundations. For example, some foundations like the Ford Foundation, organizations, Rockefeller Foundation, organizations like that have huge amounts of money left from their founders that they continue to distribute with grants. Just like a government, sometimes they seem to have more money than the U.S. government. And they can influence sports. Certain ones make sports a priority, and they will offer grants to universities. Typically at a university, you will see, thank you to the Rockefeller Foundation for, well, those names are controversial, and I won't get into controversy today. But yes, they do also support sports. And they also offer scholarships to the best students to give, let's say, a poor person, but very talented, very skillful, shikovny. These foundations and the government, the federal government and the state government, will give scholarships to pay for American universities, because they're not free, so that they can go there on a sports scholarship. And that gives an incentive to excel in sports, because a poor person can have a college degree and they can also play in their favorite sport. It's a great opportunity. So overall, as I conclude, I want to say that it is a culture of sports that comes from the roots, the koren, up into the strom of sports education. Prepačte, snažím se. And that's what makes it a success in America. And I speak from experience in that area. I hope that you have learned something new from that land far away, America, that might be useful to you, and find something that works here. And I thank you so much. Ďakujem za pozornosť.